put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. And now just put your hand over your heart and open up your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that God can do for us what God can do through us. God can only do for us what God can do through us. So if there's anybody in the church this morning that's waiting for God or one of God's children like Jesus or Buddha or Lao Tzu or Ernest Holmes or anyone else to lift us up out of our struggle or to push us from what is right now good into great, you need to stop waiting, because God can only do for us what God can do through us. Now, it's a good thing to study those people like Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu and Ernest Holmes to help us learn how to open so that God can work through us and bless our lives. But the truth is, each and every one of us already know how to do that. Every time you smile at somebody who's a stranger who is hurting, God has worked through you right then. Every time you leave a mean-spirited remark go right in one ear and out the other without any kind of visitation, you've just allowed God to work through you. Every time you share your bounty, even on those days, and especially on those days when you're not sure you even have enough for yourself, but you share your bounty, you just let God work through you on that day. Every time you stared down fear and stood in faith that you are the I am, in whatever version that is for you, you've just allowed God to work through you in your life. Every time you've allowed yourself to stand up with self-respect when somebody else is trying to mirror something else to you, you've just allowed God to work through you during that time. God can only do for us what God can do through us. Well, right now we're in a series. We're in week 2 of a series that we're doing on the back to basics from this textbook written by our founder, Ernest Holmes, called Science of Mind. And I have to show you off my fancy Bible one right now. But if any of you are Bible phobic and saying, uh-oh, wrong church. Very few of us have this, okay? Really, most of us have this. And the science of mind that we're talking about when we talk about back to basics is in the first 4 chapters of this book, which is no bigger than this right here. That's what is the basic teaching of this philosophy. There's nothing new in this book, absolutely nothing new in new thought. It's ancient wisdom organized in such a way that we can apply it to our lives today. What Ernest Holmes, our founder, did was to take things from each of these and more religions and the Greek philosophers and look at them and say, if there are common universal truths running through them, I want them in my book. So we can study them and focus on these universal spiritual truths that will help us live lives. Ernest Holmes was quick to say in this book, I don't care how much of this you can regurgitate. I want to know how much of it you can embody and work in your life. So we did week 1, and that was called The Thing Itself. Chapter 1 is called The Thing Itself, and if you weren't here, it's just another word for God. He wanted to call it something kind of odd, to separate it from our childhood notions of what God might look like. Now, some of us had great childhood notions of what God might look like, and others of us had a punishing God that only liked a few of us. And so he wanted to let people know that there was a new way to look at it. He named it The Thing Itself. Well, today we are in week 2 called How It Works. How it works. It works by letting God work through you. That's how it works. We want to learn how to be in cooperation with spiritual principles. That's how it works. There is the essence of God, and then there's the operating system of God. We must know the operating system of God in order to know how God works in our lives. And when we do that, when we learn spiritual principles and we're cooperating with them, then we get to understand what the great poet Browning was talking about when he said, our job is but to loosen our imprisoned splendor. That's all we're here for, is to loosen this imprisoned splendor that through life we've learned how to box up and keep hidden from ourselves and from one another. Our job is but to loosen that imprisoned splendor. What Ernest Holmes called the power for good. The power for good that is within each one of us. See, at CSA, we don't believe that most of us live troubled lives, and most of us don't live troubled lives. We live troubled spots in our lives. We don't believe that we live troubled lives because we're unwilling to cooperate with spiritual principle. We believe rather that we don't know spiritual principle. We haven't gone to the classes that Peggy was talking about that has educated us in a deep way what it is that spiritual principle is. For instance, I might want to lose weight, but I don't want to stop eating. Well, that's not congruent, okay? I know people who are want to be millionaires, but they won't stop hoarding. They won't get in with the spiritual principle of circulation. And so in order to be able to live lives of bliss that you were designed for, say, I'm designed for bliss. I'm designed for bliss. Say it one more time. I'm designed for bliss. I'm designed for bliss. See, until we can get that, then we won't be able to understand. Spiritual principle is the way to bliss in our lives. See, when we have those periods in our lives where we can't be in our partner's presence for 10 minutes without giving them a dig, we're outside of spiritual principle. We haven't got into those living waters and just allowed ourselves to float in them, to move in cooperation, in harmony with what spiritual principles are. When we're constantly trying to figure out how we're going to pay our bills every month, you were not designed to have financial anxiety and how you're going to pay your bills and how you're going to get enough money to go here and go there and do something else. You were not designed for that. And there is an answer in this book. There is an answer in spiritual principles. And you don't have to read this book to get spiritual principles, by the way. I'm not selling this book. They are all around. The way to spiritual principle is in so many different areas. Ernest Holmes, in this book, says this. He says, all human misery is a result of ignorance. All human misery is a result of ignorance. And only understanding of God's operating, this is my part, only God's understanding of God's operating system will get you out of that misery. And you can take that to the bank. It will get you out of that misery. It's absolutely foolproof. Last week we reminded ourselves that there is no God in the sky, but that there is a human essence of God that is in every single one of us. And I mean every single one of us. I had a guy come up to me a couple of weeks ago and he says, I just got out of prison and I'm not sure I belong here. And I wanted to tell him, honey, you are hooked up to the same divine mind that the guy who's sitting next to you from corporate America is hooked up to. It's in all of us. Nobody got left out. We're all part of that presence. Well, one of the things that we do so well here is that we worship God. And one of the reasons I love CSA as opposed to so many other of the centers that I visit, that are New Thought centers, is we love to worship here. We worship full out the essence of God. We understand that we can't even wrap our head around how big God is. We can't even fathom that. But we don't worry about living in the mystery. We love living in the mystery, and we love worshiping God. But I am here to tell you that it is not enough. Amen. It is beautiful. It is filling. It is soul stirring. But it is not enough. We have to begin to understand how the operating system works, because it is through spiritual principle that you're going to get to your bliss. God can only do for us what God can do through us in order for us to have the blessing. Now, if you're a note taker, and I know some of you are note takers, so if you're a note taker, here's what you write down. And if you're coming from the house today, just before the football game, that's good. You get your little pencil out too, because this is the most important thing I'm going to say all day. God's done God's job. Everything God will ever give you, God has already given you. It is here. The table has been set. It has been set with that energy that you simply bring into form through your consciousness. You and I are only energy. We are in form through consciousness. The table has been set with anything you could ever possibly want in your life. You want more self-confidence so you can walk into a job interview and feel fabulous? It's on the table. You want more perseverance because you keep starting things and not finishing them? It's on the table. You want a BMW? It's on the table. You want a new putter? I'm sure it's on that table. I know it is. Okay? God's given you everything you could possibly want. It is all within you. The power that Ernest Holmes talks about is within you. And we simply have to use spiritual teaching, spiritual principles to use it. It's within you. Turn to a neighbor and say, God is within me. Turn to another neighbor and say, everything I need is within me. All right, Reverend Georgia, if that's true, then why hasn't the things that I want shown up? Where are they? What's the problem? Okay. So here's the second thing I'm going to tell you that's hard to hear. This is powerful medicine. And as I often say, whenever we are in the company of powerful medicine, we're careful with it. We're careful with it. We need to be careful with this next thing I'm going to say. The reason it hasn't come into manifestation is because of your belief. It's because of your belief. Now, that's not said to you to shame you or blame you, and there's no purpose in that. In fact, I will go so far to say, if you are not getting something that you desire, and you start blaming yourself for I've got a cold, I haven't gotten my $1 million, whatever it is, if you start shaming yourself and blaming yourself, you have just committed what in my childhood would be called a mortal sin. And that is a sin. Remember, sin in religious science means that you simply missed the mark. Mortal means you killed something. Every time you shame yourself and blame yourself, you kill some of your energy. You kill some of your spirit. And we have to stop doing that. Because everything and every moment is a new moment in our lives. So if it's not manifesting and you're willing to not shame and blame yourself, here's what I want to tell you. Most of the thoughts you have of not enough-ism, whatever that not enough-ism takes place in you, that you're not good enough, don't have enough, aren't bright enough, whatever that is, was implanted in you before you were 6 years old. Most of that was, and then we kept inviting more of it in. You and I kept inviting more to heap on top of it because what it is we believe is exactly matched. And so if when we were little people, and sometimes our parents did that because they wanted us to be successful, what they called successful. I think I mentioned last week, my mother would always say, often say, frequently say, almost always say, Georgia, you're like a bull in a china shop. And I was little when she would say that. And it was because I was all over the place. I was exuberant. She didn't do it out of meanness. She did it because she wanted me to be successful. She wanted me to be a little girl like, my older sister was. It was important for her, and she thought she was doing me a favor. So not everything that we were taught that about not enoughism came from mean-spiritedness. Often it came from well-meaning people who should never have had children, probably. But they did, and that's water under the bridge, okay? Okay. So here's what we do. We have a choice. We have a choice. We can be mad at people who gave us unsuccessful thoughts and are blocking our good, or we can move on. See, those inheritances that we got of unsuccessful thoughts, we can turn back the inheritance. I don't want the inheritance. Take it back. I'm not going to use it, so take it back. Take it out of my consciousness. We have the ability to do that, you and I. You and I have the opportunity to decide, do I want to be mad at somebody or do I want to be successful? I want to be successful. I'm done being mad at people. I just want to be successful in my life. Well, how is it that I would know if I'm spending my inheritance that I should have given back? If you're talking about being lonely, if you're talking about being poor, if you're talking about being stuck in your life, you are spending your inheritance and you are blocking your vision as to what's on the table there that has been given to you by God. Now, some of us have these thoughts that are societal limitations that we've bought into. And for instance, I'm too old to do this or that. You know what? Hillary Clinton is thinking about running for president at 69 years old. She didn't think about that. Jerry Brown ran for governor at 70 years old. See, we have to get rid of, they didn't inherit those. They weren't willing to spend that inheritance for themselves. We have to just let some of this stuff go. Some of us are still feeling bad because we didn't graduate from college. And I hear this so often. I didn't graduate from college. And somehow we minimize our splendor that we're supposed to be loosening because we didn't go to college. You know what? Somebody go tell Jesus that. He didn't go to college. Somebody go tell Ernest Holmes that. He didn't go to college. There's so much. Now, look, I want everybody who wants to go to college. But if you didn't go to college and you don't plan on going to college, don't minimize your gift. You have an internal splendor that is so powerful. Prognosis is another kind of common not enoughism. Prognoses are nothing but mathematical numbers. You and I give juice to mathematical numbers called prognosis, but the prognosis itself is just mathematics. That's all it is. And if we're willing to live from spiritual principle, where principle is never bound by precedent, it's never bound by what went on before us, then we can move ahead. But we've got to unhook. We've got to be able to unhook. In chapter 2 of this book, Ernest Holmes says a powerful thing. He says, how much good can you demonstrate? And then he's going to answer it. He says, how much good can you demonstrate in your life? And then he answers it by saying, as much as you can embody. Only as much as you can embody. That's the only thing keeping us from demonstrating good. Not knowing good is out there, but from demonstrating good. But in order to do that, we have to begin to train our minds to see things in the land of what Deepak Chopra would call pure potentiality. For every setback, it's just information for you. That's all it is. It's not a stopping point. It's not even a slowing down point. It's simply information. I love the story. Many of you have already heard it. It's about my little friend Rogelio, who is going to visit his grandparents for the weekend, and his grandfather buys him one of those little plastic balls and bat. Now, for those of you who have grandchildren, sometimes you know that when you take the grandchildren for the weekend so the parents can get off by themselves, you need a little break in there because it's been a while since you've had them. And so the grandfather says, Rogelio, why don't you go outside and play with your ball and the bat? And Rogelio goes outside and he throws the ball up and he takes a swing and he misses. He throws the ball up, he takes a swing and he misses. Throws the ball up, takes a swing and he misses. And he does that for about a half an hour and he never hits the ball. And finally his grandfather goes out and he says, Rogelio, how you doing out here? And he says, oh, Poppy, I'm the best pitcher ever lived. I never get tired of that story. I love that story. Because that's what we need to do. We need to take whatever is on our plate and begin to reframe it as best we can. Oliver Wendell Holmes says that once your mind is expanded, it can never go back to what it was before. Once your mind is expanded, it can never go back to what it was before. When we see success, we stop worrying about our aging parents and we see our aging parents successful. We stop worrying about our teenager and we start seeing our teenager as successful. Yeah. That's when things will begin to shift. Now, is that all I have to do, start seeing things as successful? No, you don't. There's going to be more. That's why you want to come every Sunday. But that's the first step. Unless you're willing, unless you're committed to seeing things differently, you cannot begin. It's the first step, and you cannot get around it. You know, sometimes I say early on Sunday morning, we're not a sometimey church. We're not a, anything goes church. We have spiritual principles here. Now, we don't say words like obedient because we know everybody clear out in a minute. But the truth is, you have to be in cooperation with spiritual principles in order to be successful. The table's been set. You know, God doesn't work in miracles, and that probably is one of the greatest gift Ernest Holmes can give us, that God does not work in miracles. God works in deliverables. See, spiritual principle isn't magic. It's science. It's science. Everything that we do, we can repeat once we learn this spiritual principle in every area of our life. For instance, most of you know that when you send love out, you will get love back. That's just how it works. You send love out, you get love back. But here's what happens. We are so hooked into our human experience that if love doesn't come back exactly how we want it and from whom we want it, you know what I'm saying here? I can come back from Terry or Bill or Sue or Raelia or somebody. It's not back. It's back. Look around. We got to open our minds and open our hearts. Now, so the first week was called the thing itself. That's the synonym for God. Second week today, how it works. It works through us. God can only do for us what God can do through us. And next week, we're going to talk about... Oh, Brenda, what are we talking about next week? The way it works? No, what it does. What it does. Next week we're talking about what it does, what God does. You want to be here for that. All right, so let's take this message into prayer, knowing that the presence of God is in and around and through us. It can only be so. And so knowing that, and knowing that what I send out will always return to me exactly with the energy I send it out with, I am conscious today. I figure out what I want. I'm not going to be blown by the wind. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to speak my word into the law. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.